You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at citizensedmond, as well as go bank there, because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password, because I seem to forget it daily. So yeah, go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome. This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Very exciting episode with us today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Rafael Lavota Jr.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming down, man. I know we've been trying to do this for a long time, and you've had a bunch of stuff going on. You've had twins. I think you've been a bunch of fights. I want to say maybe you got married. There's a lot of things that have been happening since, I look back over the DMs that we've had. You're a busy man.
Sorry it took so long.
No, hey, we're all good. You're, you have a school now and all the other things that you got going on, but timing's everything, and I'm sure there's a reason that today brought us together. So I appreciate you coming down. I know you're busy. You've got twins under 2 years old. I mean, things are crazy, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge yet.
Yeah, and twins, a boy and a girl.
Yes.
Which, what did you guys know, or did you leave it as a surprise?
No, the twins was already a surprise enough.
Sure,
yeah. We had a gender reveal party with my wife's family that was super fun. And we wanted to know what we were getting into, and had a lot of planning, and it was our first time. So, that's basically, we would have been happy no matter what, right? Obviously, right. But we were hoping for a boy and a girl when we found out about twins, just so we had the best of both worlds, and it's totally totally that way right now.
Ticking both boxes, right? It's a nice thing to have when you get the shock that, oh my gosh, there's two of them, we're having twins for the first time, and then you get the announcement that you got one, boy and a girl. There's no pressure on you after then to get you a boy or get your girl, right?
Yeah.
So that's really cool to have. So Brazilian Jiu-jitsu and MMA, sounds like that's been in your entire life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. My father is a lifetime martial artist. He grew up doing boxing in Chicago, and that was kind of his first love. And then Bruce Lee came around, and Bruce Lee inspired so many people. My father was one of them. That led him down the traditional martial arts path. And when I was born in Ohio. There was a really good JKD school, Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee's system. My father was training there and was one of the assistant instructors there for a long time. And when I was born, that's where I grew up first doing martial arts. My first martial arts classes officially were at that school. Of course, my father was training me at home. Like as soon as I could get up and walk, I was doing stuff with him.
Yeah.
I have videos of me 4 years old, like hitting pads and stuff like that. And we watched Bruce Lee movies, and so Bruce Lee became my hero too. Mm-hmm. And I got to do I got to spend a lot of time with some of Bruce Lee's top students. Specifically Danny Inosanto and Richard Castillo, who are legendary martial artists. They were the ones that my dad spent the most time learning from. And so I naturally got to be around them as well as a little kid, which is pretty amazing. But fast forward, we moved to Oklahoma when I was 8, and my father got a job at Deaconess Hospital. He was a physical therapist. And of course, martial arts being his passion, he wanted to keep living that. And so he started teaching classes there, just for the staff and anyone that was maybe coming there for physical therapy and wanted to join his class. And it quickly grew to like 30 plus people, and that was all he needed to say, okay, this is the time. Let me open up my own school. Wow. And we had a little bit of a time where we turned our garage into a little bit of like a garage mat training facility, and he found his place on 36 and MacArthur. It was an old like pet shop, and there were like dead animals all over the place, and it needed a lot of work, and he cleaned it up, and we opened, I want to say it was April of 1993. So it's now over 31 years since my father started the school. And we were a Jeet Kune Do school first, and then as Jiu-Jitsu came to the U.S. and started to blow up, we were able to be a part of the first wave of Americans learning Jiu-Jitsu, and we transitioned to go that route into a Jiu-Jitsu / mixed martial arts. He called it Vale Tudo back in those days, and we've just been doing it ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. So my kind of first memories, like I'm 33 years old, and I remember my dad, sitting down watching TV, and I remember seeing Bruce Lee movies. But I think more recently there was a YouTube video of him, and he's like, it's just a Bruce Lee clip, and I think the video is to the sound of him speaking the water quote, right? Mm-hmm. But it's all in black and white, and he's just like playing ping pong with his nunchucks, and he's like lighting matches. It's the greatest video ever, and it's just to see someone that's that good at their craft, right? And then for you to experience people who he taught and be around those at such a young age, I mean, that's so awesome.
Yeah, he was definitely way ahead of his time. Just brilliant mind, a great philosopher. His quotes, his vision and perspective of life, and how he used martial arts to relate that and communicate the things that you learn through martial arts to apply in life. I think we're just so beautiful, and definitely we carry a lot of that in our teachings today, my father and I. And yeah, it was just amazing. Like I came up in a very special time because I was a kid who still got to feel the impact and impression of Bruce Lee, you know, who was back in the 70s, you know, and feel that inspiration, and then be at an age and a time to be a kid where the first time I go to Brazil to compete in the World Championships was 1999. I was barely 16 years old. And the very first Worlds in history, the very first World Championships in the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu were 1996. So I was there almost since the very beginning as an American, and going to Brazil, doing that, and then getting involved in mixed martial arts. You know, I was training and involved in the sport well before I ever fought professionally myself, and see the UFC in its roots grow into what it is today, and now the sport of jiu-jitsu and grappling growing into what it is today, and me still being able to be a part of all of it competitively, and of course as a teacher and a trainer. It's pretty amazing. Like the time that I got to be a part of was just something very, very special, and I am very grateful for it.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you're in it basically 3 years from the beginning, and to see that grassroots, to see all those people and those legends from that time, you know, all the greats that you're around, and you know, your class is one of the greats now yourself, which I'm sure for you probably still gives you goosebumps to this day, that, you know, when people put you in a category and they put the people around you and you're like, wow. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and you're still relatively, like, maybe not in your fighting career, you're not young, but you're 40 years old. You're still relatively young, you know,
Yes.
as we go on. And, yeah, I mean, that's incredible to look at. And I'm sure there's a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially when you look at your
journey,
beautiful kids and everything you have too now, right?
Yeah. The journey is, I know it's, you know, a bit, maybe overused or whatever, but really 100% the journey is the reward. I've had so many special memories and experiences and relationships built through this time, and a lot of hardships too. Being here in Oklahoma was very difficult for our journey, for my father and I to learn and get the experience and the knowledge, because we always had to travel. There was nobody here. You know, this was just way before the access. You know, now there's so many Brazilians, so many, not just Brazilians, but Americans that are high level. You know, virtually every jiu-jitsu school you walk into these days, there is a black belt instructor there ready to teach with years and years of experience. And that's in small towns and cities you've never heard of all across the country. And in our time, it wasn't like that. The only black belts that were in the U.S. at that time were in L.A., Florida, and then you had Renzo Gracie in New York. And so literally the farthest points that could be from us. Yeah. And we just got so lucky that one of the instructors, these group of brothers, the Machado brothers, first my father was trained with the Gracies, and then it became the Machado brothers, in California. My dad would go twice a year all the way to California, spend a week or 2 weeks, train every day, come back, bring what he could home. You know, there's no YouTube, there was no videos, nothing, no other way. You had to go, you had to travel, and he would learn as much as he could and bring it home. Well, the Machado brothers were instructors of Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris, who is just another incredible martial artist. Obviously, people know him from the movies and all that, but he was 100% legit, and was one of the first like celebrities like that to be 100% dedicated to learning jiu-jitsu as a martial artist. Chuck Norris did not want to discontinue his learning, and so he asked Carlos, the oldest brother, who was at that time kind of known to be the best instructor out of all of them. He asked Carlos to come with him to Dallas, Texas, when he was going to film the Walker Texas Ranger show. And so my father was already training with the Machado brothers, and Carlos ended up calling my dad. This was like the very end of 95, early 96. Okay. And said, hey, I'm going to be moving to Dallas, Texas. I just want you to know, you know, I'm going to be there. He's like, is that close to you? You know, he's like, didn't fully understand where we were in comparison. And you know, to add another layer to this story, my dad doesn't like to fly. So he was driving all the way to LA.
24 hours.
Yeah, straight, nonstop. And I did that drive with him a couple times too. And we would just pull over, sleep, and keep going like that kind of way. But so my dad was ecstatic. He's like, yes, this is way better, much closer. And so then that really changed our lives, because then we had a very high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, OG. Carlos is now considered a grandmaster, or at least a master, within 3.5 hours of us. And that changed our lives. So it's incredible. I like to mention that, because it's like Bruce Lee changed the direction of my father's life, led him to the martial arts life. Yeah. And then Chuck Norris, if it wasn't for Chuck Norris, who knows what would have happened with our jiu-jitsu journey, because we would still have been driving to LA and figuring it out from there. But Chuck Norris brought Carlos, and that changed everything for us. And so then we could go in one day. My dad would go down in the morning, do a private lesson, stay and do the morning class, train, and then drive right back and then teach class himself that night at our school. And so then he was doing that every week. And then when I got a little older, I would go down there and I would spend different, Christmas break, spring break, whatever, training down there. And then that's what really took us off.
Yeah.
And my father became was his first blue belt, and was literally his first student before he had a student, and then we became the first American father and son jiu-jitsu black belts years later. But yeah, so I don't even know how I got on that, but just talking about the the time that we came up in. Jiu-jitsu was so scarce, and the world championships were still in Brazil. Now the world championships are held here in the U.S. But my first trips to do the world championships, I was going to Brazil the summer between my sophomore and junior year of high school. That was 1999. That's when I did my first worlds. So I went back to school the next year. I'm still a junior in high school, and I've already been to a third world country and seen and experienced all that. It's been an insane journey.
Yeah. I've said this many times on the podcast, of people who are in a family business, it's such a blessing when you look back. You're like, of all the memories I have with my dad, to do the hard times, the best times, like to be, father, son, black belt together, like that's special.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It is. Definitely the hard times were there. But it's amazing to see it all come to fruition, it all work out, even more than what you could have ever imagined. We had no idea. We're 100% just following our passions, listening to our heart. My dad, actually, he didn't want me to live martial arts as my livelihood. I was going to college. Actually, I did a semester at OU, and then it was costing me so much time driving. I was driving there that I said, what, let me just do some of my, basic classes before I go to OU. So then I switched over to OSU in OKC. Sorry. To knock out some of that
electives
stuff.
And basics.
Right.
Yeah.
And be closer to training, because I just wanted to train. I just wanted to compete and chase my dreams. But my dad was like super strict on me to go to school and do something else. Like don't.
Yeah. That's interesting, right? That's like a lot of, he's following his dream, right? By opening up his own place. Mm-hmm. But like you said, he's a physical therapist. He's gone through the schooling to get there. Yeah. And it's interesting to know that he's got you and clearly he sees your tenacity and like your love for the sport, and you're around all these greats you want to follow. Mm-hmm. But that must have been hard for you at the time too. And then you're growing up in this era too. You're growing up in like this kind of like, it's maybe you don't know it's grassroots at this point, but you probably have a sense of it. But also as a young man, there's so many things going on with you as a young man. You're like, I know better. We all remember what we were like when we were 16 to 18 years old. We all thought that we owned the world, right? Yeah. And the last person you want to listen to is your old man.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough time because I'm an only child, and so it was kind of all on me. I always felt I definitely grew up fast. I was in the school around adults all the time. I was training with adults even before jiu-jitsu came along. When I was like boxing and stuff like that, I'm a big guy. When I was 14, 15, I was already a big kid. I would spar with adults, full on. And so anyways, I felt like I was one of the guys. And so I matured very quickly, especially through traveling and just everything that I was doing. But, I always felt a lot of pressure. And of course, every son wants to make his dad proud. Also, every father wants his son to have the things that he didn't, right? Yeah. So stability and consistent income were things that we did not have. Yeah. The business of martial arts wasn't there yet. The UFC still hadn't blown up. And the fact that we were so ahead almost hurt us, because people definitely were looking for karate, taekwondo, traditional martial arts schools. And when they came into our school, they really didn't understand what we were doing. And it wasn't what they were looking for. And my dad, he's an incredible martial artist, but the business itself, it still had some rough edges to be worked out, to make it, help it reach more potential success. And so there were a lot of years where we barely got by, and my dad was, he was working a lot of odd jobs. He was a bouncer for several years, and just picking up any little other things he could do to help pay the bills. And then, of course, they were investing everything they could into me. When I was doing these trips and stuff like that, we would hold fundraisers, and, it was always scraping by. And I felt so fortunate that it did get passed to me, and I had all these opportunities. And then I was ready to try to make it all worth it. It's like, I need to go all in. But my father, he just, like I said, he wanted me to live a professional life of some sort. Eventually I found my future mentor, in the jiu-jitsu world, who is a legendary multiple-time world champion. And he basically gave me the push. He was like, what are you doing? Why are you in school? This is not the way to do what you want to do. And he opened up some doors for me. And basically I had to talk with my parents, and long story short, I dropped out of college and I ran up a bunch of debt to travel and compete and live jiu-jitsu, but opportunities started coming my way. And basically 3 years later, I became a world champion, and everything changed. Now, it's not like our school really blew up or anything, because the exposure it's not there, right? But my opportunities inside the jiu-jitsu world started expanding, where I could teach seminars, and we began our own association, the Lavota Jiu-Jitsu Association. So I have a network of over 40 schools across North America. Wow. And all of that started blossoming from that time, little by little. And but now the sport, it's crazy. It's crazy, right? Because there was no money to be made back in my. You were lucky if you broke even. You were lucky if you did win some money enough to pay for all the expenses, from the training to the traveling, the hotel, everything that you put into it. You were lucky if you could break even or just barely lose a little bit of money. But like I said, I'm very grateful that I came up into that in that time, because I got to see the sport in its roots, and there was no thought of fame or making money. It was all very pure. I just want to follow my heart and know that I put everything into my passion. And that's what I told my dad. I said, I can't look back and wonder what if. I need to go all in. And he got it. At the end of the day, he understood. And maybe that was part of my test as a man, was to be able to have that conversation with my father and say, hey, look, I need to do this as a man. I'm not happy in school. I was very good in high school, but as soon as I graduated high school, I hated school. I didn't want any more of it. I knew what I wanted. And And at the end of the day, I think he understood. I'm like, hey, I mean, it's your fault.
Yeah.
You know, you made me fall in love with this, and you showed me how to work hard and go for your dreams. So that's what I got to do.
Yeah, you're a product of your environment growing up, right?
Yeah.
When you go to OU, I mean, other than doing electives, like, did you have any idea of like, oh, I'm just gonna go do, like, did you think of, if I'm gonna do a career, did you pick one or you just go?
I was just doing business management.
Okay.
I didn't know. I was leaving doors open. I thought maybe I'd be an accountant or something because I like numbers.
Okay.
And I always had an entrepreneur's mindset. I liked being in control, you know, and doing it on my own. I like figuring things out, doing it on my own. I love being a business owner, and I love helping other people with their businesses now. And nowadays it's really cool because there's so many layers to the jiu-jitsu business and opportunities and things that you can do, that it's fun to see like a potential empire and try to expand and grow and hopefully one day I can even get outside of that martial arts realm and reach. My goal would be to reach, you know, everybody and hopefully, you know, just give them some inspiration to help them on their own journey.
Yeah. So you have the conversation with mom and dad. You're going all in. 3 years later, you win, and you're the first American, right, to win.
I was the second American. Second American. BJ Penn was the first one, who's a legendary UFC champion, multiple weight class champion. He was the first one to do that. And he did it in 2000, and I was there and I watched him do it. And I set my sights on it and I want to be the next one to do that. It took 7 years. I was still a kid. Yeah. But what's interesting is the year that I did it in 2007, it was the first year that the World Championships moved to the United States. And so I became the first American to win on U.S. soil.
Gotcha.
And that same year, I did something else that had never been done, where I won all four of the majors, which are the European Championships, the Pan American Championships, the Brazilian Nationals, and then the World Championships. And so it's like, you know, the European, the biggest competition in Europe, the biggest competition in Brazil, the biggest competition in the U.S., the Pan Ams, and then the World Championships. And it all kind of happened by accident, but it happened, and I won each one, and I became the first person to. They call that the Grand Slam.
Yeah. Why did you say it happened by accident?
Well, so it didn't even have a name yet. Like it wasn't. That wasn't a thing to do yet.
Got you.
The Europeans.
I thought you meant like your wins happened by accident. Well, they definitely didn't.
I didn't know I was going to do it like that.
Gotcha.
Going into that year. But the European, I think the very first European Championships was like 2004. Okay. So that was still a relatively new event. Gotcha. But the year before, the year before 2006, I was very sick during the World Championships, and I missed the Worlds that year, and I had never missed a Worlds previously. And that was like devastating. I already had my plane ticket and everything, and I ended up getting mono, and I was extremely sick, and there was just no way I could do it. And I was super bummed out. And going into the next year, I remember telling my number one training partner, the guy that I've been with on my career together the whole time. I remember telling him, "Hey, let's go to the Europeans. Let's get this year started early." He was into doing it. And I said, "Let's go." And at this point, traveling was just like, I mean, by far the coolest thing about my job. It's hard to even call it a job, but my work is the amount of traveling I get to do. And so I was really excited for the opportunity to get to Europe. And he was down. So it's like, okay, let's go. So we go, and I ended up winning. And it was awesome. Had a great time. The Pan Ams, you always do the Pan Ams because it's in the U.S. And so I did that, won that, and then the Brazilian Nationals. So that was right when they announced that the Worlds was going to be held in the U.S. And I was a little bummed out, to be honest. It was exciting. It was cool. It was going to take things to the next level, but I grew up competing in Brazil, and I fell in love with competing in Brazil, and it was my goal to win in Brazil. And that the feeling of competing in Brazil is unlike anything else. I mean, it's like, you know, it's the motherland, right? You know, that's it's the birthplace, and the passion, the energy. And if you ever watch like the I say soccer, you know, football games there, you see the chanting and the crowd. I mean, that's the kind of energy that they take to the jiu-jitsu competitions as well. They'll have drums, they'll be banging the drums, and, you know, they have special dances, and they're waving their flags, and, you know, that's what made me fall in love with jiu-jitsu when I was a kid. And
it's pure
and it's
passion.
just raw. It's raw. And the pride, I mean, everything. It's just beautiful. And so when they announced it, I was like, man, I really need to go back to Brazil because I want to win in Brazil. And the Brazilian nationals, and just kind of Brazil in general, I had never won a gold medal in Brazil. Every year I went to the World Championships, I either left with nothing or I left with a silver or a bronze medal. And, you know, this is part of my story, right? Just never give up, keep going, always staying positive, and eventually when it happens, it happens, you know? And so I said, man, I got to go back to Brazil. And I didn't have anyone to go with me. I said, all right, I'm going by myself. And so, and I had lived there. When I dropped out of school, I moved to Brazil for 4 months. That's what I did.
Yeah.
And that's why I ran up the debt and everything. I said, I got to go all in. And I moved to Brazil. So I lived in Brazil, so I can speak pretty good Portuguese, and I know my way around. So I said, all right, I'll go by myself, whatever. And
Were you like late teens, early 20s?
This was 2007. So I was 23, going on 24.
Gotcha.
But in 2004, I was 20 when I dropped out of college. And I had my 21st birthday in Brazil. Yeah. And I competed that day. And I never had a drink or anything. I never had my first drink till I was like 25. Yeah. That's how
dedicated.
Yeah, I was almost boring. People used to make fun of me. No one wanted to hang out with me because I was like so serious. But anyways, so 2007 said I got to go to Brazil. I want to win in Brazil. The world's going to be held in the U.S. So I go there by myself, and I win the Brazilian Nationals, and that was such a special moment for me. You know, my first gold, getting it as a black belt, and that was a history-making thing. No gringo, like non-Brazilian, had ever won that event before, and then each one was just a confidence booster. Yeah. So then when I came back home and it came time for the Worlds, I really felt like, man, I can do this. I'm ready to be champion now, and I had medaled in 2005, but I missed 2006 because I was sick. And then boom, 2007, I win. And then afterwards, they kind of figured out, like looked at it all. They had a triple crown, which was the Pan Am's, Brazilian Nationals, and the Worlds. But then they say, oh man, you win all four. We need to call that something. And they called it the Grand Slam. And now that's something that so many young black belts, they actually try to do. Yeah. And I got to be the first one.
That's really cool. When you win down in Brazil, you know, like I said, it's validation, right? For all the hard work you've been putting in, staying focused. You're at the home of the sport. You got the fans. Everyone's around you. You know, it feels right. What's the state? But
it's dead quiet.
Because you're American.
Exactly.
Which also puts a chip on your shoulder, which is the greatest thing ever as well.
But what's cool is there will be some respectable claps.
There was respect.
There will be some respectable claps. Yeah. And what's really cool, sorry, I'm taking you out of your question, but years later I go back to do it again. And I end up winning the absolute division, which is even more prestigious. That's like the open weight. All the best guys from every weight class will go into this division. So there's
just
no weight
free
class.
For all, no weight class.
It's a giant division, a bigger division because it's all weights.
Yeah.
And
kind of
normally,
the true best person wins.
Yeah, normally whoever wins that, I mean, that's what people want to win the most. And I was able to win the absolute division in 2013. Yeah.
What were you weighing in at that time? Compared to what you would have fought
200, 205.
Okay, but what was your fighting weight for what you were you always at that, like, fighting weight?
And around that age,
absolute?
yes. Nowadays, I'm more like 220.
Okay.
But when I was a little younger, I was a little
Yeah.
smaller, and I was like 200, 205.
Okay.
So I wasn't the biggest, but I was definitely not the smallest. I was still good size. But the guy that I went against in the final was like 250. But
you had speed versus his. Well, I say that too. Those guys
there's
at
pros and
250
cons.
can still move.
Yeah. He can move.
Yeah.
But so, anyways, I go back and I had like a real what really fired me up for that event that year. It's just this whole reminiscing and thinking about being a kid. Now this time, 2013, I'm going on 30. So now it's been a pretty full journey already up to this point. And so I'm there, and I really have made my name now. You know, I'm a multiple time world champion, gi, no gi, done a lot of things. You know, it's been a pretty good career thus far. And I decided I want to go back to Brazil again before it's all said and done with, and let's try to win the absolute. And I have people coming up to me to take pictures with me, ask for autographs, and like I have Brazilian fans. And I remember the first time a kid came up to me to ask for a picture, I was just kind of like it didn't really dawn on me. Like,
Do you think I'm someone else?
Yeah, it was just like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. I am who I am. That's right. I've done some things. But it was a very surreal moment to imagine, because for me, I was that kid, an American kid who would go to Brazil and see all these monsters, and they were like these, you know, like these, I don't want to say mysterious, but these magnificent
gods.
Figures.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was something that I dreamed to be, but I didn't even really understand that I had gotten there yet, all the way. Of course, I checked some things off the list, but that really hit home, because then I'm like, man, I've made it in a point where when I used to come here, I looked up to everybody, and I was nobody, and now I come back to the same place, and they're looking up to me, and that was something very special, and then that just gave me all this juice to win again. And that was another, you know, beautiful moment. But yeah, so anyways.
What's the state of kind of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at that time when you're 30 years old and you go back and you've had sort of a career and then you're kind of ticking off things on the list, but deep down inside you know you've got more in you. What's the state of Oklahoma City, the business back home, and what Dad's doing?
Things had really started to blossom. You know, like when the Worlds moved to the U.S. in 2007, that changed the trajectory of everything, because now all the top Brazilians, they need a home in the U.S. It's hard. It's very hard for Brazilians to get out of Brazil. First off, for them to get a visa can be very, very difficult. And then, you know, you're talking about the language barrier, culture barrier. Where are they going to train? Where are they going to stay? You know, there were still very few here before that. And so then a lot of the best teams and a lot of the best guys started setting up home bases in the U.S. And the Worlds have always been held in Los Angeles. And so, of course, that Southern California just became a mecca. From LA to San Diego, it's just filled and filled and filled. And jiu-jitsu is so a part of their culture there in Southern California. Everybody knows what jiu-jitsu is. Like, everybody, they don't have to practice. They just know it. They have a friend or a family member or someone that does it. It's very close. And so that's one of the biggest, like, dense jiu-jitsu populations in the U.S. Now Texas is becoming like that.
Okay.
Specifically like Dallas, Austin. There's tons and tons of jiu-jitsu in Texas. So anyways, people started setting up, you know, their own camps and everything, to where now when guys come, they have a place to train, they end up staying with somebody, whatever. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And then those places got so dense, and they're looking to set up schools. They start going to other places, and jiu-jitsu just spread, and all the opportunities spread. And then at the same time, the UFC is starting to blow up, and people are figuring out that, okay, mixed martial arts, that means multiple martial arts. And then they're looking at, boxing and Muay Thai, wrestling and jiu-jitsu. And they're starting to understand, okay, jiu-jitsu is grappling. That's what they're doing on the ground, and submissions and things like that. And so people want to learn. And Oklahoma, of course, it's a combat state. Yeah. We are, very athletic and sporty, basketball, football, and of course wrestling. And some of the best wrestlers of all time are from Oklahoma. And so many people have wrestled at some point in their life, grade school, middle school, high school, college, right? And they want to keep it up, do something for fun, and keep learning or keep competing. And so I ended up taking over my father's school officially in 2010, but I was helping a lot in 2009. He had some health issues. That was a really hard time. And so it wasn't planned to go the way it did, but I kind of was, thrust into that position to help my father out a little bit. And then we just kind of decided as a family that it was best for him to kind of semi-retire and I take things on. And so then I started learning about business and running a martial arts school. And at the same time, the sport's growing and all these opportunities are happening. And our school really took off right around that. It got substantially better every year, but I'd say by 2013, we were doing really, really good. So the last 10 years have been amazing. But life was in a pretty good place at that time. But I had been doing, now my whole 20s was all jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And 2013 into 2014, I started to, of course, that moment in Brazil, I was fully fired up. But it was hard to find that fire all the time. And then that's when I knew it's time for me to go to the mixed martial arts arena and get that challenge. So I started later than most, but it had always been there. Yeah. And a lot of people didn't know that about me. They saw me as just a pure jiu-jitsu guy, but they weren't familiar with my full martial arts upbringing. And, we were doing full on MMA before MMA really even existed here at our school in Oklahoma. And I used to be, my dad, back in these days, it was a different time. There's no social media. There's no Yelp business reviews or Google reviews or anything. And our school was right a couple doors down from a bar called the Zodiac Bar. And there was a dart shop next door to us. And, it wasn't the best neighborhood. It's really not a great neighborhood now, but it wasn't good back then either. And there would be people that would stroll in and want to challenge, somebody. And by the time I was 15, my dad would just tell them, hey, why don't you go with my son? And, and make him sign a waiver. We'd put gloves on and we'd go at it. And there was some good times. So I was
fighting some drunk 40-year-old that's just stumbled out of the bar.
Or it wasn't a drunk person. It was a wrestler, or someone that did Taekwondo, karate. Yeah. But they came in with an attitude. Yeah. And what are you going to teach me? Because back then, no one really understood what was going on.
They got humbled real quick.
And so my dad would use me as the humiliation factor, right? I still had acne on my face and everything, but I was a good sized kid. By the time I'm 15, I'm 170, 180. Yeah. And
when you're tall too.
Yeah. And I had boxed and, of course I was competing in jiu-jitsu and I wasn't afraid. And so, I was fighting grown men. Yeah. Just like that. And so we had a lot of fun back then. We don't do that now. For anyone interested in coming, please, we have a fundamental beginner program. Come in, start. We don't do anything like that now. But, that was the kind of school that we had back in the days. It was an old school style.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I always knew I would do MMA eventually, and 2014 is when I had my first fight.
Leading into that MMA stuff, then does Bellator make do they reach out to you? You're like, hey, you're one of the top Brazilian Jiu-jitsu fighters at the time, that 2013, 2014 time. Like, how does that go into, obviously UFC's growing, mixed martial arts is growing as well. You got UFC and Bellator. Like, how does that? Do they approach you, or do you just say, how does that happen before you jump in the ring with the?
Well, there was another show that's still around, a very prestigious show called Legacy.
Okay.
And there used to be two events, Legacy and what was the other one? RFA. It was called RFA. I think the R standard for Resurrection, or God, I don't remember what the R stood for, but it was Legacy and RFA. And now they've merged into one show, LFA. And so it's still around. And in fact, one of my guys, who's a coach at my school, was one of their champions a couple of years ago. But that's I would say it's the equivalent of being like a D1 player, and if you become the champion there, you're going to get signed. And you're going to go pro. I mean, it's already pro, but you're going to get signed. You're going to go to the NBA or whatever, NFL, which is UFC, Bellator, and so Legacy. The owner of Legacy at that time is a man named Mick Maynard, who works with the UFC now. He's a matchmaker. You often see him when the guys face off. He's the one standing up in the middle, holding the belt or making sure they don't fight each other. He was the owner of Legacy back in those days. And he was based in Houston, Texas. And obviously, I've been in Texas. I mean, I've been driving down 35 my whole life. And so I knew him. He had done some lessons with me in the past. And I already kind of told him, like, hey, when it comes time to fight, I think you're the show for me to fight in, because it's very well respected. And, they were on Access TV, so they were on TV. And it was just a good show, good, clean show to get your career started. Now, a lot of guys have to fight in smaller shows before they can make it to that show. But with my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, I was able to go straight there. And they did shows in Oklahoma and, down here through the South because they were based in Houston. So it made sense. And obviously he knew I was going to sell 100 plus tickets with my student base. So it was a win-win. And so that's where I did my first fight, my first 4 fights. And I became their champion and I defended the belt. And then, so I'm 4-0. And then it was like, we're taking a look at the potential opportunities, and I had an offer from UFC, but Bellator made a little more sense at that time. It was better business-wise overall as far as financially, and also just where I was at in my career. Only 4 fights, I didn't quite have the experience I would want for the UFC yet, and it's hard to have a big say when you're just getting signed in the UFC. You don't really they give you an opponent and you got to say yes. Yeah. And Bellator was a lot more willing to work with me on the whole thing. And so I said, okay, let me go Bellator. And then, after I get some more experience, maybe I'll go and switch over to UFC. But Bellator was working out great. I mean, they were at the WinStar. So I sold a lot of tickets and, just having sponsors. You couldn't have sponsors in the UFC. There's a lot of things that financially made it make sense. And I got to move fast. I was like, I want this, that one. I did 3 fights my first year. And by my second year, I was doing, ranking opponents, working my way into number 1 contender status. And then that's what I did. Just constantly step up. Yeah.
So you were 11-0, is that right?
I was 9-0 when I got the opportunity to fight for the belt.
Okay.
That was my 10th fight.
Yeah, and there's a huge story around that, right?
Yes.
With it being delayed and you having to go get scans, and I will link your Joe Rogan interview down below so people can hear that in an hour and 27 minutes of you talking about it. But I would love for you to share that story because I think it speaks a lot about the grit, the good, the bad, the hard times you've been through, being in Brazil, FaceTiming, your girl at the time, like, I don't know if I'm going to be, what am I doing, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. So you had some heading. You had, from what I understand, is that this title fight requires you to get a head scan, right?
Yes. So, man, there were so many things, even things I didn't even mention in the Joe Rogan show, and that's literally what the whole show was.
Yeah.
He knew something was going on. He gave me a platform because I was already scheduled to defend my belt, and things were happening that I couldn't fight, and I knew that a narrative was being built. Oh, Lavota won the belt. He doesn't want to defend this and that. He's afraid. And I had already signed. I mean, everything was supposed to be happening. I'd already started a camp and all this stuff. And basically, Joe gave me the opportunity to control the narrative and have my voice. And so when he was like, hey, so what's been going on? I'm like, well, let me just start from the beginning. Yeah. And I just literally lay it all out from when I found out to getting through the fight and everything. But
is this 2019?
2019 is when the fight happened.
Yeah.
I go on the Joe Rogan show January 2020.
Okay.
And it was like, man, right when Kobe passed too, something about these leap years, 2020 pandemic, like that year was a mess. Very, very tough time for me on so many levels. But basically, I was supposed to fight for the belt January 2019. Mousasi got hurt. We were originally going to fight in California. Thank goodness we didn't, because there's no way the fight would have happened if it was in California.
Yeah.
I ended up going in limbo, waiting. They tried to get me to take another fight. Well, they didn't like push me, but they were offering other fights, and I said no.
Because you're already in camp at this point, right? You're
well,
fit, right?
I did a camp, about half of a camp,
okay,
and then he got hurt, and I pulled out,
okay,
or he pulled out, and I just said, okay, I'm going to rest,
sure,
right? Because I'd already had a big year, and this was going through the holidays, because we were going to fight in January. And sure enough, I went to Colombia. My wife is from Colombia. She was my girlfriend then. And I did a whole trip with her. I got to meet her family, and actually that led to her moving in with me that year, because I asked her, we were falling in love, right? And
before you dive into the head stuff, how'd you meet? Is Diana?
Yes.
Okay. How'd you meet Diana?
Diana. Yeah. We met. We were both traveling. Okay. I was on the road doing a seminar at one of my affiliate schools in New Jersey, and her brother went to Cornell, and she was in New York visiting him, and we ended up just right place, right time in the city, and yeah, it was amazing.
Timing's everything, right?
Yeah. So we were doing a long distance thing for a while, but anyways, I ended up going to Colombia, and I just needed a break. And then she ended up moving in with me. So in the year 2019, when all this was going on, she was at home with me. But so eventually they rescheduled the fight for June in London, which made a lot of sense for them, because Mousasi is a European fighter, and he's huge in Europe. He'd actually won world titles in London before. And so we finally get rescheduled, and it's set. I'm like, okay, great. And so I start my camp, and for every fight, there's a list of requirements for the fighter to get approved, physically and all that. And so, you got to do drug test, blood work, whatever, get a physical, get someone to sign, all that normal stuff. But this was the first time that I was required to get a brain scan. And it was something that the London Commission, the European Commission out there, required. And the only two places in the US that require it are California and New York. And maybe Vegas too. Could be Vegas as well. But places I had never fought in. I fought in Oklahoma, Texas, Chicago, Idaho, like some random places. But I was still early on in my career, so I hadn't fought in these places yet. And that was one of my dreams, was like, man, Madison Square Garden, and Bellator goes to Madison Square, or they used to. Now they've combined with PFL. But anyways, so London, I'm like, oh, amazing, right? Title fight in London at Wembley, like, come on, But I got to do this brain scan. So I go do this brain scan, and I get into more detail on the Joe Rogan show, but basically, guys like, hey, there's something wrong with you. And immediately, I'm like, whoa. like just taken aback. Like, you don't expect that, because I've never had any issue, and I've never been knocked out. I've never, I don't even really get headaches.
Yeah.
So, and the next day I was scheduled to fly to Brazil. And so he's like, hey, I'm not signing your paperwork. Like, look at this. There's something wrong. You need to go see a specialist. I'm not equipped to tell you what's wrong with you. But here's what I think it is. He ended up telling me the next day, he's like, I think you have this. And it's called cavernoma. And he shows me the locations, and I can see on the scan, okay, that's right. It doesn't look normal. And so I'm like, I'm literally in my own head thinking about my head, and thinking about all these worst case scenarios. And of course, you get on Google, and then I start
spiraling out of
seeing all these
scrolling.
terrible stories of people with cavernoma. Basically, the main symptoms are seizures, loss of, like, paralysis, loss of use or vision. You can't see, and worst case stuff is like coma, and even death, having to have emergency brain surgeries and stuff like that. So basically my brain produces extra blood vessels that end up kind of like vines wrapping up together, and then they wrap up together, and then they have a potential to leak blood. They call it oozing blood. And so some of my spots are fairly good size, and those are the ones that have the most potential to ooze blood. And of course, if you bleed too much, you hemorrhage, and big problems, and that's when they have to do emergency surgery and pull it out. But I've never had any issues, no problems, so I had no reason to get a scan done. And at this point, I'm like, I didn't have all this knowledge yet. I haven't seen any specialists, and I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to do in the next 6 weeks.
And you're heading to camp. You're heading to Brazil to go to
the
camp.
hard part of my camp.
Yeah.
The hardest part.
Mentally ready to go.
Yeah, where it's basically sparring every day. It's very physical. You're going to get hit in the head a lot. Yeah. And everyone there is a specialist standing. Yeah. Where I'm a specialist on the ground. They're specialists in the stand-up game, the Muay Thai, which is odd. You don't think of Brazil, you think Brazil Jiu-Jitsu, but the south of Brazil, where I was going specifically, the south of Brazil has a huge European influence. Okay. And Dutch Muay Thai ended up there years ago, and it birthed some of the best MMA fighters of all time were birthed from the influence of Muay Thai in the South Brazil. Vanderlei Silva, Anderson Silva, Shogun Rua, all Hall of Famers, legendary champions. They're from the place where I was going to train. And so anyways, it's not the place that you want to be going to when you're worried about your head, And it was a very stressful time. I basically cried every day. I was an emotional mess. All I wanted was, first, of course, I wanted to be healthy. Yeah. But there was a point at which I didn't care anymore. I didn't have a family yet, and what mattered most to me was living out my dream. And I was ready to accept anything. Now, I already got hit in the head on a regular basis. I've already fought 9 times, and nothing had happened yet. And so for me, whatever the risk was, it was worth the risk to do at least one more. I had to fight for that belt. And so I had to just do whatever I could to figure out a way to get approved to fight. And that led me to seeing all these doctors in Brazil. I was in Brazil for almost 20 days, 18, 19 days, like 2.5 weeks for this portion of my camp. And so I couldn't do U.S. doctors. I had to do it while I was there, and which was, in fact, a good thing because I had connections. The guys that I was there with, they're like born and raised in this city, and they knew a lot of people through martial arts. Down there, the martial arts, you're famous. Yeah, it's not. It's getting like that here, but it's even more so there. And so they had all these connections. They were getting me to all these great doctors. And it was just no after no after no, to the point where we didn't even go anymore. We just sent them the scans, and they would say no before we even got to talk to them. And literally, the last doctor on the list, and keep in mind, I'm just a mess. I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm trying to train through it, but number one, I don't even know if it's happening, if I'm gonna get to fight or not. Number two, I'm still very concerned about my health. And so every time I'm taking a shot, I'm like, oh man, did that punch get me one step closer to something bad happening? And so I'm not sleeping. I'm super stressed. I'm emotional. Training terrible because of it.
You get hurt in training too,
and then I get hurt.
Yeah.
I popped my hamstring very, very bad. I never got an MRI on my hamstring. I don't know if it tore completely or it was definitely a minor tear for sure. I had to get carried out of training that day. I was just a mess and I was crying. And there was a point where I said, man, I give up. Like, it's not happening. I give up. And I have to be like losing weight at the same time, all this stuff. And basically they're my brothers. My MMA coach and the guy that I've done my whole jiu-jitsu career with, he was there with me, both Brazilian guys. They basically lift me up enough to say, hey, go to this last doctor. Let's just give this last doctor a try. And he was the one that was most booked up. That's why he was the last one, because we couldn't get in to see him for like a couple of weeks. And he was a professor, and he had been the teacher of several of the other doctors that we had already seen. Yeah. And he was the first one, when we sat down in this office, he was the first one to actually ask me, how do you feel? And just have a conversation with me. And he was so relaxed about the whole thing. Didn't like freak out, look at my scan, be like, no, just did a little test, like took me through some like mobility things and test my reaction and all that. And at the end of it, he was just like, look, there's nothing that's going to tell me, no data, no research, no paper, no journal, nothing that's going to tell me that that head trauma is going to make this worse. It can change at any point in time. We don't know when. It may never be a factor, or it could be a factor tomorrow. We don't know. But the fact that you're in good health now and there's no symptoms, all I can say is keep living your life, but get regular scans done, and we're going to keep an eye on it.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. Will you sign my paper?
Please?
Yeah. And he says yes. Yeah. And he writes a special note, puts all his credentials on there. We send it in, and then now we're waiting for Bellator to get the commission to approve it. Basically, I didn't know the fight was going to happen until 2 weeks before the fight. So I did the whole camp not knowing. Finally, they give me the green light, and maybe it was so last minute they didn't know what to do. They couldn't change anything. Whatever happened, it happened the way it was supposed to happen. And destiny came, and it ended up being the toughest fight of my career, as it should have been. I was a huge underdog. The guy had 5 times the amount of fights of me. Was considered an all-time GOAT of actually 2 divisions, and 45 wins, 5 losses, right? Something like that he had. And then I became another loss for him. And it came down to the 5th round, 2-2. And, it was a last round, best round moment. Yeah. And that's everything that I went through leading up to that fight. That's when it was my advantage. It was my strength, because I knew without a shadow of a doubt, with all my heart, that I wanted to be there. Yeah. And at the end of it, I wanted to be there more than him. He was more there for a check and for what he thought was going to be an easy victory. Yeah. And when things got really hard, I wanted it more, and heart prevailed. And actually, the last round was my best round. It was the most dominant round I had, and I got the decision victory. And my first time to go 5 rounds, my first big fight like that. Everything was stacked against us, but we did it, and it was beautiful, and definitely, a moment I'll never forget. And then, like I said, that was June. We were going to do the rematch, and I was going to defend the belt in January in California. the same place where we were going to fight the year before.
Yeah.
And I'd already started a camp, and then they said California, and I'm like, guys, you know, California is not going to like. And I had signed the contract, everything. I had a new contract. I was about to get championship money, you know, all these things. And, you know, it was the Forum, a legendary arena where the Lakers used to play. You know, I think even Muhammad Ali boxed in the Forum once. You know, big stuff happened there. And dream. And all the promotion, everything was ready to go. And I'm like, guys, let's talk to California because I can't do another camp not knowing if it's going to happen. And so we sent everything we had into California. I went to UCLA, saw another specialist who said, an even greater specialist, a neurosurgeon who's dealt with my case and said the exact same thing as the doctor in Brazil. But they said no. And even the European Commission, in my camp, during the camp when I was getting ready for the rematch, one of the doctors there called me up, found my number, got in touch with me, called me, and said, hey, we created a panel and studied your condition and did a whole process to understand how we would deal with this in the case that happened again in the future. We decided that you shouldn't have fought, and we will never let you fight here again. And if anyone else comes to that situation, we're not going to let them fight. And he basically was like, you got to stop. And that's when I told Bellator, hey, we got to talk to California. I just got this call from Europe and everything else. And so then 2020 started.
Right, and COVID hits, right?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And it was just an up and down time. Beautiful things were happening, but at the same time, I had all these personal things with, you know, fighting. And I really fell in love with MMA. I love jiu-jitsu. Of course, that's like my first love. Yeah. But MMA, to be honest, I feel like I'm more made for MMA than anything else. I think that's what I'm best at on a competitive stage, and I was really starting to tap into my ultimate, like, black belt level. As a champion. That experience catapulted me. The training that I was doing in my camp after that, I was on another level. Yeah. And so I was very excited to get to show the new version of me that was going to come as a champion. And so, you know, all these things happened, and I didn't give up. I started a process of a hearing with the commission over Zoom because it was a pandemic time. And I spent a year and a half going to see different specialists. I went to the Cleveland Clinic, saw all these doctors, got more scans done, did all these tests, and spent an insane amount of money on all this because now Bellator's not covering any. This is all on my own dime. And, you know, I'm spending thousands and thousands of dollars on all of this stuff. And I sent it all in. And, man, I got so close to getting a unanimous yes. And then one guy shut it down, prolonged it even more, and then when I finally came back with even more tests done, he had swayed them all to say no. And so I'll never get to fight in the U.S. again. You know, and now I'm a dad, and I'm going to be 41. You know, I'm in my 40s now. Yeah. But even now, like I still feel really good. You know, I'm still competing the highest levels of grappling and jiu-jitsu, and even now, I still miss it a lot. Like I was just sparring one of my guys today, and it just, I miss it. I miss it. I did get one more fight. I went to Japan and got to do like the last fight, I guess you could say, and that was a dream come true. Fighting in Japan. This was New Year's Eve of 22, going into 23. And so 3.5 years later, finally, Japan was always kind of the last hope, but the pandemic, the borders were closed. I had to wait, you know, a long time before they were doing international events where people could come from outside of Japan. And then it all happened, and it happened in a beautiful way. And I was a father now with my twins. We took them to Japan. They came into the ring with me, my wife, my babies, and that was beautiful. And that was just all about not giving up, and got a victory there. And so all things considered, I'm very content. I'm very grateful. I'm happy. I'm healthy. But that was definitely a tough time.
Yeah. And
I still miss MMA so much.
Yeah, there's still that fire in you. There's still unfinished business, right?
Not unfinished. It's just
not as ending it the way you wanted to end it.
As a martial artist, I really have the art mindset. You know, okay. It's an expression of your best self and the way you put it together, your technique, your mindset, your heart, your skills, what you've worked your whole life for. You get these pictures. This is me in this moment today. This is what it looks like. And I just feel like I have so many pictures I didn't get to show because my career, even though it was very full, I got to be a world champion, it was still very short. And even now that I haven't been fighting MMA consistently in 5 years, I am, even now, today, I am way better now than what I was when I won the title. In every facet, my striking's better, my wrestling's better, you know, my jiu-jitsu's even better. And I know the MMA game even better because of that experience, and I'm still been teaching it and you know, training and helping my guys and all that stuff. So I feel like I'm even better now, but I don't get a platform to show and challenge myself doing what I love, you know. But it is what it is. I can't complain.
Right.
There's no complaining.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier like the mental side and the philosophy side of things, and I, if I remember correctly, you carry the same book around with you when you fight, and you looked at a page, you opened it up day of the fight in London.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
So the book is called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's basically like the self-help Bible, you know, it's kind of the first of its kind. And all the gurus out there who, you know, help, like within the self-help category, you know, everything we're all kind of still saying exactly what was said in that book. Yeah, it was a life-changing book for me. I got a hold of that right after I won the world championships, and it helped me kind of put in perspective the things that I was doing right without really knowing 100%, you know, that I was on that plan. Then it also showed me things that I could do better. And so I fell in love with that book. My first signature gi that I had, I put one of the quotes from the book in the gi. It's probably one of my favorite quotes of all time. Victory is always possible for the person who refuses to stop fighting. That was my career. I wasn't a world champion at the lower belts, you know, the things I've been saying. But I didn't give up. You keep fighting, you keep going. You know, the only true failure is when you quit. If you never quit, there's no end to your capacity of success. And and that's something like we say in jiu-jitsu. A black belt is a white belt who never quit. You know, we're all the same. I'm still learning. I'm still getting better. There's no difference between me. Maybe of course I put in more time, but I'm still learning now. I'm still getting better the next day, just like the white belt who's getting better the next day. It's much more detailed, but we're there for the same reasons. You just don't quit. You just keep going. And so that quote stood out to me, and then the whole book just resonated with me. The first time I read it, I started crying. Like, I just got super emotional about it, and I just felt like, man, I'm seeing it. And so I carried that with me basically through everything. And yes, fight night in London, I hadn't opened it in a little while. Of course, I had this whole like, why me phase going on. Like, why is this happening? You know? And so I was depressed, and then getting hopes, and then getting shot down, and all this stuff over and over again. But fight's happening, backstage, getting warmed up, getting taped up, all that kind of stuff. And I said, okay, I'm gonna open the book. And I had the flap, in the book saved on a certain page. And I had outlines and underlines and stuff, highlights. And I open it. The first thing I see is a highlighted part that says, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. And boom, that was another quote that just hit me. This adversity that I went through is going to be my advantage. You know, whatever you overcome, temporary failures, obstacles, you know, all the hardships that come when you're following your dreams, that's to be expected. When you overcome those, when you don't quit, it makes you stronger and it becomes your advantage. You get smarter and you also get to tap in deeper to your why. That whole time when I was in Brazil, and I'm processing, trying to navigate through, I was just tapping in deeper to my why. I need this fight because this is for my family. This is for my name, you know, everything that my father did, what he built, for my coaches, for my team. You know, my coach who had spent thousands of hours training me, he'd been on this journey with me. I wanted him to be a world championship coach. I wanted him to be able to say, I've created a world champion. You know, all these things, I found a deeper connection to my why that gave me a stronger sense of purpose, that made me not want to give up, say, I got to get this fight. I got to do this fight. And that was what catapulted me in the 5th round after having a tough 3rd and 4th round. You know, blood in my eye, cut open, can't see, got dropped, all these things, to then having my best round of the whole fight, you know? And that's it, you know, and the book is so powerful to me. One of my next goals in life is to hopefully put a book out there that can do something like that for somebody else. It may not be the thousands or millions of people that have been impacted by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. But if I can get a book out there that does something like that for somebody, then it's a success. And that's what I'm working on now. And hopefully it'll be done by the end of this year.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, how do you pass what you've learned on to, you know, like your school, the next generation, but also, I mean, you're a dad now, right? And you know, even though your son and your daughter, you know, they're about to be 2 or getting close to 2 years old, there's going to be a point where they grow up like you did around your dad, right? And like, you know, that's something I'm sure you and Deanna have spoken about. Is like, is he going to fight? Is he not going to fight? What's going to be the state of mixed martial arts in, you know, 10, 12, however many, we don't know. Yeah. But you also get to take all your experience and not only give it to your students, but you get to do what your dad did and give it to your kids now too, which is...
Yeah, for sure. Definitely feel a lot of responsibility, of course, being a parent. And, you know, you think about how, because pressure is going to be inevitable. And I felt a lot of pressure, being my father's son, being the son of the head instructor, and having a lot of expectations. And it's how you manage it, you know, but there's healthy pressure. I fully believe there's healthy pressure. And so that's something I'll definitely have to learn how to put on my children, healthy pressure. You know, basically, did you give your best? You know, and that's all you can ask for. But go for it, whatever it is. You know, if it's martial arts, awesome. I'm gonna know a couple things to help them with that. And I want martial arts education to be present in their life no matter what, if not purely for self-defense, but also all the other things that you learn in an individual practice like that, I just think are extremely valuable for life, especially for kids nowadays. You know, the health, both physically and mentally, spiritually, to problem solve and stay calm and control aggression and emotion and all these sort of things. It's the most beautiful thing about martial arts. And that's why people love jiu-jitsu, because you can be any shape, any size, any age, and go into a jiu-jitsu at a good school. You can go into a jiu-jitsu academy and start class at 0 and begin your journey, and share that with everybody else, and be a part of a community. And we're all there doing the same thing, just working on ourselves through some friendly combat, you know? And so I want that for my kids no matter what. But yeah, you know, let's see what they're going to get into. But definitely, I think from the moment I read Think and Grow Rich, in the back of my mind, I thought about having my own book at some point in time and sharing my journey. That's what I get to do as a teacher in bits and pieces. Every day I try to give some talk, of just inspiration, always in positive, give them some positive mental notes to help them be excited for the next class, inspired to come back, just keep them coming, keep them working. Let them know this is the path, this is the journey you're on, and everything you're going on is normal, Don't get frustrated, don't compare yourself to others, all these sort of things. Help them. I'm a guide, right? I'm just a guide. And I've been through it and I'm still going through it with you, And so that's given me the chance to really organize my thoughts and what it is I have to say. Of course, the journey I've been on as well and all these experiences. So now I'm putting it together, putting it down. And I learned that the thing that I loved about teaching the most is having that opportunity. I love teaching the technique itself, of course, but if I can give you a little thing that can get in your head and help you do that much better, whatever it is, through jiu-jitsu, through martial arts, and you go into life and you're just a little bit of more confident, whatever it is, then I did something really good, and so that's what I love to do the most. That's what inspires me to be on the mat the most with my students and push them to be the best leader I can be and give them that stuff. And so through that, I've found the passion for talking and getting these opportunities, things like that. And so, yeah, now I'm going to put in a book and hopefully that goes outside of the martial arts world and does some good for people. And we'll see what happens there. But at the end of the day, also, that's like, I'm going to dedicate it to my kids. It's for them, and that's my voice. So if anything happens to me, they'll always have that to hear what Dad has to say.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about the confidence you carry once you've done hard things, right? Or the confidence you carry knowing that you can take care of yourself if something happens. Right?
Yeah.
And it's my younger brother has just started Brazilian Jiu-jitsu probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. He's a police officer.
Oh, nice.
So he comes from the CrossFit world. He's big, got big into CrossFit, and then he started. And
is he here in the city?
No, he's back in the UK.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But he will be here hopefully this summer. I'll have to bring him by. But he loves it. And the same thing. He's like, I get humbled. Yeah. It's going to help me being a police officer with work, but. He's like, he explained it to his early journey also with CrossFit, learning and constantly learning, and now he's doing this, and he's in good shape, but he's lean, but he's like, I FaceTimed him probably 2 weeks ago. I said, how was it? He goes, well, I got folded up by someone who's half my size. He got humbled real quick. Yeah. But it's constant learning, and it's that maintaining that kind of child mindset of learning every day, right? And like you said, the value you're going to get out of it,
for sure,
so much.
It keeps you young. So many of the guys that I'm around. In that space, I look at them and they're, 40s, some of them in their 50s, and I'm like, man, these guys look pretty freaking good. Yeah. And that's part of what I teach too, is just developing a practice and a lifestyle to help you do what you love, for as long as possible, like longevity. Like that's the other part of life. Like, let's get the most out of it. Let's live a full life. And so, our lifestyle, how we take care of ourselves, how we continue to learn and challenge ourselves and keep moving is so important. And jiu-jitsu is the best. So that would be another thing that I hope that my book accomplishes is make more people want to Google jiu-jitsu, see what's around them, and hopefully start and practice as well.
Yeah. Well, mate, pleasure. Thank you so much for coming down. Thank you for sharing some stories. We could do this. I know we could sit here for hours, but I really appreciate you coming down.
My pleasure.
And it's awesome to hear you talk about your story and your passion. And obviously now that passion gets to lead into you being a dad, which is special, passing that on, and inspiring the next generation. And when the book comes out, would love to have you back on to talk about the book as well,
for sure,
and everything like that. But for people listening, I will put the link to your Instagram and your school. People can check that out.
And they can actually go to LastRoundBestRound.com. Okay. And that will be the title of my book.
Okay.
And there's a documentary there now following me in Japan, coming back for that last fight.
Oh, sick.
And the documentary was done by an amazing documentarian who did the anatomy of a fighter. I always call him Big Will. His name is Will Harris, and he is super famous for the anatomy of a fighter. It's a YouTube series he created that had millions and millions of views on several different videos. He spent a lot of time with Habib and the Dagestani guys and Usman, a lot of the big UFC champions. And I had the honor and pleasure of having him document me and my team as we got that call for Japan.
Okay.
And
how long is the documentary?
So it's
live now on the website. People can listen to this and go straight there. Great. I'll link it below.
Is it 3 or 4 episodes? Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. It's either 3 or 4 episodes. Around 15 to 20 minutes each. I think the first couple are around 20.
Yeah.
So it ends up being an hour, a little slightly over an hour total. Mm-hmm. But they're all there, but you have to go to the website.
Yeah.
The plan is when the book's going to come out, I'll just put them on YouTube and whatnot. But yeah, so that's there. And timelessjujitsu.com is my jiu-jitsu like inspiration site that I try to put out there for people. And then I have my school here in Oklahoma City. So all the Oklahoma listeners, if you're not doing jiu-jitsu yet, please come by. I'm on Hefner and May, right there. Beautiful location. We've got a 10,000 square foot facility, and would love to have people come on in and check us out.
Brilliant. Yeah, I will put all those links down below. People can go check that out and watch that documentary. Again, thanks for coming in. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mike.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by Citizens Bank of Edmond. Citizens Bank of Edmond has been serving Edmond since 1901. They pride themselves on investing in the community and are here for all your personal and business banking needs. For more information, go to mycitizens.bank and follow them on Instagram at citizensedmond, as well as go bank there, because I bank there too. It's been a fantastic personal experience for me. I've had my podcast account there now, my podcast business account there now for 4 years now, I think, and it's been fantastic. So definitely worth your time. They're a great group of people, and they're always there to answer the phone when I forget my password, because I seem to forget it daily. So yeah, go to Citizens Edmond and check them out. It's been awesome. This episode is brought to you by the Dog House OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Dog House have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Dog House. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.